They said wait here, Mom. 12 hours later, they were in Japan. I was still sitting. Not forgotten. Abandoned. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. My name is Margaret Collins. 75 years old. Retired librarian from Ohio. I raised 3 children. Buried 1 husband. Paid my taxes for 54 years. That Tuesday morning, my son David told me to wait in the airport lounge. His voice was slow, patient, the way you talk to a child who won't understand anyway. Just wait here, Mom. We'll be right back after check-in. His wife Hannah smiled. That brittle smile I knew too well. She guided their teenagers toward security. Ethan had his headphones on. Lily was texting someone more important than me. Michael, my oldest grandson, was away at college. 2 states over. Missing this family disaster. Lucky him. I sat in the plastic chair. Next to a dusty plant. The kind that survives on neglect. The departure board flickered above my head. Numbers changing. Flights leaving. People rushing past with purpose. I watched the clock. 1 hour. 2 hours. 3. My back ached from the hard seat. My purse sat heavy in my lap. The brown leather bag that Paul gave me for our 25th anniversary, still good after all these years. By noon, I knew. By 1 o'clock, I was certain. By 3, I stopped checking my phone. By 5, I finally stood up. The clerk was young, tired. She looked at me with professional sympathy. Ma'am, that flight to Tokyo departed at 1:30. It's gone. I nodded. David was many things. Selfish, controlling, impatient, but never careless. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't confusion. This wasn't a mistake. By then they were halfway to Japan. 35,000 feet above the ocean. Eating airline meals while I sat on a plastic chair. I walked back to my chair. Sat down again. Stared at that dusty plant. 50 years of Christmas mornings. 50 years of birthday cakes. 50 years of emergency babysitting when their lives fell apart. 50 years of being useful. Until I wasn't. The airport grew quiet around me. Afternoon travelers became evening commuters. The food court smells shifted from coffee to dinner. The cleaning crew started their rounds. I thought about calling a taxi. Going home to my empty house in Ohio. Waiting for their apologetic phone call. Their explanations. Their promises to do better next time. But there wouldn't be a next time. I knew that now. I locked myself in the restroom. Not to cry. I was past crying. I needed to breathe. To think. To decide. When I came out, the departure board glowed like a beacon. Cities I'd never seen. Places I'd never been. A lifetime of staying put was behind me now. San Diego caught my eye. 7:40 p.m. Departure. Why San Diego? I couldn't say. Paul and I went there once. Years ago. For our anniversary. We walked on the beach. Ate fish tacos. Watched the sunset. He's been gone 3 years now. Maybe that's why. I walked to the counter. The same tired clerk looked up at me. "One way to San Diego, please." She paused. Looked at me carefully. As if I might change my mind. One way? One way. I used the credit card David didn't know about. The one I'd kept hidden for emergencies. Well, this qualified. The plane was half empty. I chose a window seat. Watched Ohio disappear beneath me. The lights getting smaller. The distance growing. By 10 o'clock, I was standing in San Diego International. The night air hit my face. Salt and jasmine. Warm and clean. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for anyone. For the first time in years, nobody was waiting for me. I picked up my brown leather bag, the only thing I had left from my old life, and I walked toward whatever came next. Behind me, Ohio was sleeping. My son was probably calling my house, leaving messages I'd never hear. Ahead of me was a city I didn't know, a life I'd have to build, one day at a time. I was 75 years old. I had $1,200 in my checking account. I had no plan, but I had something I hadn't felt in years. I had a choice. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. The first night, I stayed at a motel near the airport. $59. Cash. Desperate owner. Desperate customer. The room smelled like disinfectant and other people's cigarettes. The bedspread was orange. Faded orange with brown flowers that looked like stains. I sat on the edge of that bed, stared at the wall. The wallpaper was peeling near the window, curling up at the edges like old photographs, like memories trying to escape. I thought about calling David, explaining where I was, asking him why, but I knew why. I'd become inconvenient, an obligation, a burden they carried because they had to, not because they wanted to. The air conditioner rattled all night, on and off, like breathing with broken lungs. I didn't sleep much, but I didn't cry either. In the morning, I walked to a diner across the street. Ordered coffee and toast. The waitress was maybe 40. Tired around the eyes. She refilled my cup without asking. The coffee was bitter, strong. It tasted like starting over. After breakfast, I walked. No destination, just walking. San Diego was different from Ohio. The light was sharper here. The shadows cleaner. Palm trees lined the streets like green umbrellas protecting the sidewalks. I passed a laundromat, a pharmacy, a small grocery store with handwritten signs in Spanish and English. This was a neighborhood where people worked, where they lived paycheck to paycheck, where they didn't abandon their mothers at airports. On the corner, there was a bulletin board, cork and metal, covered in index cards and flyers. Room for rent. Quiet lady only. The handwriting was neat, careful, no nonsense. I copied down the phone number. Found a payphone outside the grocery store. Dropped in my quarters. The voice that answered was sharp. Direct. Like scissors cutting paper. She told me her name was Joan Parker. 70 years old. Retired bus driver. The room was small but clean. $120 a week. Cash only. No noise, she said. No boyfriends. No drama. I told her I was 75. Recently widowed. No boyfriends to worry about. She laughed. A short bark of a laugh. Come by this afternoon, she said. We'll see if you're tolerable. The house was on Elm Street. Number 42. Painted blue once upon a time. Now it was more gray than blue. Like the sky before rain. Joan Parker opened the door before I could knock. She was shorter than me. Square shoulders. Gray hair cut practical and short. A cigarette between her fingers. She looked me up and down. The way you'd examine produce at the market. You look clean, she said. That's something. The front yard was mostly dirt. A few stubborn flowers grew near the porch. Survivors. A fat orange cat sat in the window, watching us with yellow eyes. That's Rusty, Joan said. He comes with the house. She led me inside. The living room was small. Clean. A television. 2 chairs. A coffee table with magazine rings stained into the wood. The room for rent was in the back. 10 feet by 12. A single bed. A dresser. A window that looked out on the neighbor's fence. It wasn't much, but it was mine if I wanted it. The window let in afternoon light, golden and warm. I could hear children playing somewhere nearby. Their voices carried on the breeze like music. "I'll take it," I said. Joan nodded, like she'd expected nothing else. "First week in advance," she said. "Cash." I opened my purse, counted out 6 20s, placed them in her palm. Her hands were rough, working hands. Hands that had gripped a steering wheel for 30 years. Hands that knew what it meant to earn a living. We shook on it. Her grip was firm. That evening, I unpacked my brown leather bag. 3 dresses, 2 pairs of shoes, my medications, a photograph of Paul, my crossword puzzle book, half finished. I'd been working on it the morning David told me about the trip to Japan. The morning he told me I couldn't come. I set the photograph on the dresser. Paul smiled back at me. That crooked smile I'd loved for 47 years. He would have understood this decision. He would have been proud. Joan made grilled cheese sandwiches for dinner. White bread, American cheese, butter that hissed in the pan. We ate at her kitchen table. Formica top, chrome legs. The kind of table that belonged in every American kitchen in 1975. She didn't ask questions, didn't pry, just passed the salt when I reached for it. The sandwich was perfect. Crispy outside, melted inside. Comfort food that actually comforted. After dinner, Rusty jumped onto my lap. 20 pounds of orange fur and purring engine. Joan watched from across the table, testing me, seeing if I'd push him away. I scratched behind his ears. He closed his eyes, settled in like he'd found his person. "You'll do," Joan said. That night, I lay in my new bed. In my new room. In my new life. The sheets were clean. They smelled like detergent and sunshine. Outside, the city settled into evening. Cars passing. Dogs barking. The distant hum of traffic on the freeway. Normal sounds. Life sounds. For the first time in months, I felt safe. The next morning, I walked. Looking for work. Not because I needed adventure. Because I needed money. $1,200 sounds like a lot until you start subtracting. Room rent. Food. Bus fare. The small things that add up like drops of water filling a bucket. I passed a hardware store. A beauty salon. A check cashing place with bars on the windows. Then I saw it. A small diner squeezed between a shoe repair shop and a cell phone store. Mel's Cafe. Hand-painted letters on glass. Faded red and white. In the window, a handwritten sign. Help wanted. Morning shift. I stood on the sidewalk. Stared at that sign. 75 years old. No restaurant experience. No references in this city. But I could pour coffee. I could carry plates. I'd been serving people my whole life. The difference was, this time I'd get paid for it. I pushed open the door. A bell jingled above my head. The smell hit me first. Bacon grease. Coffee. Toast. The smell of morning in America. Red vinyl booths lined the walls. Cracked in places. Patched with duct tape. The floor was checkered linoleum. Black and white squares worn smooth by decades of shoes. Behind the counter stood a woman about 50. Stocky. Strong arms. Hair pulled back in a messy bun held together with bobby pins and determination. She looked up from wiping down the coffee maker. Sized me up the way Joan had. The way women do when they're tired of being disappointed. I told her I was there about the job. She set down her rag. Her name was Carla Mendoza. She'd owned the place for 15 years. Worked 7 days a week because good help was harder to find than honest politicians. She asked about my experience. I told her the truth. I raised 3 children, ran a household for 40 years, cooked 10,000 meals, cleaned up after people who never said thank you. Carla listened, nodded, asked if I could start at 6 in the morning. I said yes. She said we'd try it for a week. See how it went. Trial basis, she said. No promises. I understood trial basis. My whole life had been a trial basis. That first morning, I arrived at 5:50. The sky was still dark. Street lights reflected on wet pavement like scattered coins. Carla was already there, coffee brewing, grill heating up. She handed me an apron. Pink with white trim, stained but clean. The morning rush started at 6:30. Construction workers, nurses ending night shifts, office workers grabbing coffee before facing another day of fluorescent lights and meetings. I learned fast. Coffee in the white mugs, tea in the blue ones, sugar on the table, cream in the little metal pitchers. Order up meant food was ready. Behind you meant get out of the way. Table 7 needed more ketchup. Table 3 wanted their eggs over easy, not scrambled. My feet hurt by 8 o'clock. My back ached by 9. But my hands remembered the rhythm. Pour, serve, clear, wipe, repeat. The customers were kind. Mostly. They called me hun, sweetie, ma'am. Better than being called a burden. One regular caught my attention. Table by the window. Every morning at 9:15. Arthur Green. Maybe 80 years old. White hair combed neat. Flannel shirt pressed clean. Work boots that had seen decades of honest labor. He ordered the same thing every day. Coffee with 2 creams. Wheat toast, lightly buttered. Sometimes he'd add scrambled eggs. Never bacon. Doctor's orders, he told me. He was a widower. Retired carpenter. Built houses for 35 years before arthritis made him hang up his tools. His wife had died 2 years ago. Cancer. They'd been married 53 years. He talked about birds, blue jays, cardinals, sparrows that nested in his toolshed. Simple conversation. Quiet companionship. The kind of talk that doesn't need to prove anything. At the end of my first week, Carla handed me an envelope. $520. Cash. Morning shift. 6 days. 30 hours total. California minimum wage plus generous tips from grateful customers. Good money for honest work. Money I'd earned serving coffee and kindness. I walked to the thrift store on 4th Street. Found a navy blue winter coat. Wool blend. Good bones. $25. It wasn't new, but it fit like it was made for me. I wore it walking home. The pockets were deep. Deep enough to hold keys. A wallet. Hope. Deep enough to hold a new life. That evening, Joan asked how the job was going. She was washing dishes at the kitchen sink. Sleeves rolled up. Practical as always. I told her it was good work. Honest work. She nodded. Dried a plate with a dish towel that had seen better decades. Good, she said. Nothing wrong with earning your keep. Rusty wound around my ankles. Purring his approval. I scratched his head. Felt his warmth against my legs. This was what family looked like now. A practical woman who spoke her mind. A fat orange cat who didn't judge. A job that paid fair wages for fair work. Not what I'd planned at 75. But better than what I'd left behind. Better than being invisible in my own son's house. Better than waiting for permission to exist. That night, I counted my money. $520 minus 25 for the coat. $495 to start my new life. Not much. But it was a start. Tomorrow I'd get up at 5:30. Put on my pink apron. Pour coffee for people who said thank you. People who saw me as Margaret. Not as somebody's inconvenient mother. For the first time in years, I was looking forward to tomorrow. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. 2 weeks into my new life, I made a mistake. I turned on my phone. 37 missed calls. Voicemails stacked like accusation. Text messages buzzing like angry wasps. David's voice. Clipped. Controlled. "Where are you, Mom?" Hannah's voice. Staged panic. Fake concern. "We thought you were right behind us at the airport." Right behind them. For 8 hours. On a hard plastic chair. I deleted the messages. One by one. Watching the numbers disappear. But they kept calling. The phone would ring during my morning shift. Vibrating against my hip like a guilty conscience. I'd silence it. Pour more coffee. Pretend my past wasn't hunting me down. At night, Joan would glance at my purse when it buzzed. Raised eyebrows. Questions she didn't ask. Smart woman, Joan. She knew when to mind her own business. 3 weeks passed. The calls slowed down, then stopped. I thought it was over. I was wrong. The letter arrived on a Tuesday. Regular mail. My name written in David's careful handwriting. Inside, a newspaper clipping. The Columbus Dispatch. Local section. Missing grandmother. Family worried. There was my picture. The one from last Christmas. Smiling in my red sweater. Playing the part of the grateful mother. The article called me vulnerable. Confused. Possibly suffering from dementia. David was quoted. "We just want her safe," he said. "She's not thinking clearly. Not thinking clearly. After 54 years of clear thinking. After raising his children when he was too busy. After paying his mortgage when his business failed. After being abandoned at an airport like forgotten luggage." I sat at Joan's kitchen table. Read the article 3 times. Each word a small knife. Joan looked over my shoulder. Read in silence. Set down her coffee mug harder than necessary. "You should sue them for underestimation," she said. But I didn't want to sue. I wanted them to stop. That evening, I wrote a letter. By hand. On Joan's good stationery. To whom it may concern. I am Margaret Collins, 75 years old, of sound mind and body. I am not missing. I am not confused. I am not suffering from dementia. I am living safely in San Diego, California. I have employment. I have housing. I have friends. I left Ohio voluntarily after being abandoned at the airport by my family. Further interference will be considered harassment. Any contact should be made through this address only. I signed it with my full name. Margaret Elizabeth Collins. I mailed it the next morning. Certified. Return receipt requested. Let them explain that to their worried friends. 2 days later, a police officer came to the diner. Young man. Polite. He'd gotten a call from Ohio about a missing person. I showed him my identification. Answered his questions. Signed a form that said I was safe and sound. Not missing. Not confused. Not in danger. Just done with being someone else's obligation. But in the noise from Ohio, one voice mattered. Michael. My oldest grandson. 19 years old. Away at college. His letter arrived 2 days after the newspaper article. Handwritten. Careful cursive on notebook paper. "Grandma," he wrote. "Are you okay? Everyone's talking but no one's listening. Dad says you're confused. Mom says you're having a breakdown. Ethan and Lily don't even care. But I remember you. I remember how you made me feel smart when everyone else made me feel stupid. I remember your kitchen. How it smelled like cinnamon and safety. I remember you reading to me when I had nightmares. Your voice made the monsters go away. Please call me. Please let me know you're all right. I miss you. Love, Michael. At the bottom, he'd written his phone number. His dorm address. An email address I didn't understand. I folded the letter carefully. Put it in my purse next to Paul's photograph. That boy had always been different. Quiet where his siblings were loud. Thoughtful where they were thoughtless. He'd spent summers at our house. Paul teaching him to fish. Me teaching him to make pancakes from scratch. He'd called me Grandma Maggie. Said I made the best chocolate chip cookies in Ohio. Maybe in the whole world, he'd say. His mouth full of cookie. His eyes full of love. I called him that evening. From the payphone outside the grocery store. He answered on the second ring. Grandma Maggie? His voice was deeper now. College had changed him, but not the important parts. I told him I was safe. Told him about Joan and Rusty. About my job at the cafe. About Arthur and his birds. He listened without judgment, without trying to fix me. Then he told me about his job. At a bookstore near campus. How books didn't yell at you. How they waited patiently to be understood. He was studying literature, poetry, things his father called impractical. But I heard the passion in his voice. The way Paul used to talk about building something with his hands. Before we hung up, Michael asked if I needed anything. I need you to know I'm proud of you, I told him. I need you to know this isn't about you. I need you to know I love you. No matter what they say about me. There was silence on the other end. Then a sound like sniffling. I love you too, Grandma Maggie. After I hung up, I walked home slowly. The evening air was cool. Sweet with jasmine from someone's garden. At Joan's house, Rusty was waiting on the porch. Orange fur glowing in the porch light. Inside, Joan was watching the news. Wars and weather. Politicians making promises they wouldn't keep. She looked up when I came in. Saw something different in my face. Good call? She asked. The best, I said. That night, I wrote Michael a letter. Told him about my first paycheck. About learning to serve coffee to strangers who said thank you. I included a $20 bill. Not much, but something. Buy yourself a book, I wrote. Buy yourself something that makes you happy. Something that doesn't yell at you. Something that waits patiently to be understood. Life settled into rhythm. Wake at 5:30. Work at 6. Home by 2. Simple. Clean. Mine. Arthur became part of that rhythm. Every morning at 9:15. Same table. Same order. Coffee with 2 creams. Wheat toast, lightly buttered. He told me about his tool shed. How sparrows had built a nest in his old drill box. 3 eggs the size of marbles. Blue with brown speckles. He checked on them every morning. Talked to them like old friends. His wife Rose used to do the same thing. Fed birds from their kitchen window for 30 years. Cardinals mostly. A few blue jays. 1 robin that came back every spring. After she died, the birds still came. Looking for her. Waiting by the empty feeder. Arthur filled it now. Rose's birds. Rose's morning ritual. The way you carry someone forward. In small acts. Daily bread. We talked about simple things. Weather. Birds. The way coffee tastes better when someone else makes it. Never about why I was in San Diego. Never about why he ate breakfast alone. Some stories don't need telling. They live in the space between words. Michael's letters arrived every 2 weeks. Regular as clockwork. Written on notebook paper in careful cursive. He'd found a girlfriend, Jenny. She studied art history, painted watercolors of old buildings, laughed at his jokes even when they weren't funny. He was working more hours at the bookstore, saving money for graduate school, maybe teaching someday, high school English, like I had been a librarian. Books and learning, knowledge passed down, the long chain of understanding. His father thought it was impractical. No money in poetry, David said. No future in literature. But Michael had his grandfather's hands. Paul's gentle way with fragile things. Words instead of wood. Same careful attention to craft. I sent him $20 with every letter I wrote back. Not much, but consistent. Buy yourself something beautiful, I always wrote. Something that feeds your soul. Meanwhile, my routine expanded. Work, home, evening walks with Joan. She'd lived on Elm Street for 25 years. Knew every neighbor, every story, every secret. Mrs. Chen at the corner house grew the best tomatoes in the neighborhood. Mr. Rodriguez fixed cars in his driveway on weekends. The Martinez family had 4 kids under 10. Loud but happy. Normal life. Working families. People who looked out for each other. Joan had driven city buses for 30 years. Seen everything humanity had to offer. The best and worst of people getting from one place to another. She'd never married. Never wanted to. Had 3 sisters back in Minnesota. Talked to them every Sunday. Long-distance calls that cost real money. But worth it, she said. Family is family, even when they drive you crazy. I thought about that. Family driving you crazy versus family driving away. Different problems. Same broken hearts. One evening, Joan suggested we bake for the neighborhood potluck. Monthly gathering in the community center. Covered dishes and folding chairs. Democracy in casserole form. I hadn't been to a potluck in years. David's family preferred restaurants. Clean plates. No cleanup. No commitment. But I remembered potlucks. Church basements. School gymnasiums. Everyone bringing something to share. I found Paul's recipe box in my purse. His mother's lemon cake, handwritten on an index card stained with vanilla and thyme. 3 eggs. 2 cups flour. 1½ cups sugar. The measurements faded but still readable. Joan's kitchen smelled like cinnamon and butter while we baked. Like memory made edible. The cake came out golden. Perfect. Paul's mother would have been proud. At the potluck, I was the new person. The stranger. Questions behind polite smiles. But my cake disappeared first. Empty plate. Requests for the recipe. Mrs. Chen complimented the texture. Mr. Rodriguez asked for seconds. The Martinez kids left crumbs and satisfied faces. I wasn't Margaret whose family abandoned her. I wasn't the confused old woman from the newspaper. I was Margaret who made the lemon cake. Margaret who worked at Mel's. Margaret who lived with Joan. Present tense. Current life. New identity. Arthur showed up halfway through the evening. Surprise guest. He brought homemade bird houses. 6 of them. Different sizes and colors. He'd made them in his garage. Kept his hands busy. Kept Rose's birds happy. People gathered around his table. Admiring the craftsmanship. The careful joints. The tiny details that mattered. He caught my eye across the room. Nodded slightly. Recognition between 2 people who understood starting over. After the potluck, Joan and I walked home slowly. Full stomachs. Tired feet. Good tired. The neighborhood felt different now. Less like a place I was hiding. More like a place I belonged. At home, Rusty was waiting on the porch. Orange fur silver in the moonlight. He followed us inside, jumped onto my lap while Joan made tea. The three of us. Odd family. Chosen family. Joan with her cigarettes and practical wisdom. Rusty with his purring engine and unconditional warmth. Me with my brown leather bag and determination to start again. That night, I wrote to Michael. Told him about the potluck. About Arthur's birdhouses. About belonging somewhere new. I told him about choosing family instead of accepting the one you're born with. Some families are given, I wrote. Some families are found. Some families are built one day at a time. One shared meal at a time. One act of kindness at a time. You get to choose which kind you want to be part of. I sealed the letter. Added a $20 bill. Wrote his address in my careful script. Tomorrow I'd mail it. Tomorrow Arthur would order his coffee. Tomorrow Joan would make grilled cheese sandwiches. Tomorrow was predictable now. Safe. Mine. For the first time in decades, tomorrow felt like a gift instead of an obligation. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. 3 months into my new life, my past came looking for me. I was refilling Arthur's coffee when I saw her. Standing outside the diner window. Staring in. Hannah, my daughter-in-law, David's wife. She wore her traveling clothes. Dark jeans. White blouse. The same outfit she'd worn to the airport. The day they left me behind. She stood there for maybe 2 minutes. Watching me work. Watching me pour coffee for a stranger who said thank you. Then she turned around. Walked away. I set down the coffee pot. My hands were steady, but my heart was hammering like a woodpecker. Arthur noticed. Asked if I was all right. I told him I was fine. Lied smoothly. Professional waitress smile. But I wasn't fine. I was angry. Angry that she'd found me. Angry that she was watching. Angry that my chest felt tight just from seeing her face. Mostly angry that part of me had hoped she'd come inside. She didn't come back that day. Or the next. But I felt her presence like a storm approaching. On Thursday, she returned. This time she came through the door. The bell jingled. She looked around uncertainly. Tourist in a foreign country. She chose a booth in the back. Far from Arthur's table. Far from the other customers. I approached with my order pad. My armor of professionalism. She looked older than I remembered. Tired around the eyes. Guilt will do that to you. She ordered coffee. Black. Her voice was quiet. Careful. I brought the cup. Set it down without meeting her eyes. She wrapped her hands around the mug. Like she was cold. Like she needed something to hold on to. We didn't speak. What was there to say? She sipped her coffee. I refilled sugar dispensers at nearby tables. Both of us pretending this was normal. After 20 minutes, she left. $2 on the table. Exact change for coffee and tip. Polite to the end. The next week, she came back. Same booth. Same order. Same careful silence. This became her pattern. Tuesday and Thursday mornings. 9:30 sharp. After Arthur left. Before the lunch crowd arrived. Carla noticed. Asked if the lady was bothering me. I told her no. Just a regular customer. But she wasn't regular. She was a ghost from Ohio. Haunting my new life. On her 5th visit, she finally spoke. She said they'd panicked that day at the airport. Said the flight was boarding. Said they thought I was behind them. Thought. Not knew. Not checked. Thought. I kept wiping down tables. Let her talk. She said they'd looked for me. Called my name. Asked the gate agent. But the plane was leaving. David had important meetings in Tokyo. The kids were excited. Everything was rushed. Excuses. Layers and layers of excuses. Like paint covering rotten wood. I stopped wiping. Looked at her directly. 8 hours, I said. You didn't call for 8 hours. She looked down. Stirred her coffee with a spoon. The metal clinked against ceramic. We were in the air, she said. No cell service over the Pacific. But you had 8 hours on the ground first, I said. 8 hours while I sat in that chair. The silence stretched between us. Tight as a wire. She tried again. Said they'd come back as soon as they could. Said they'd been worried sick. Worried sick. After abandoning a 75-year-old woman in an airport. After flying to Japan for 2 weeks while she sat wondering what she'd done wrong. I refilled her coffee without being asked. Professional courtesy. Nothing more. She thanked me. Her voice cracked slightly. Then she said something that changed everything. She said she was sorry. But not for what I expected. Not sorry for leaving me. Not sorry for the newspaper article. Not sorry for treating me like a burden. Sorry for something else entirely. She was sorry that she'd been relieved when they couldn't find me at the gate. Sorry that her first thought wasn't panic. It was freedom. Sorry that she'd wanted the trip without me. Without my shadow in every room. My opinions about their parenting. My presence at every meal. She said it quietly. Like a confession. Like pulling a splinter from her soul. I didn't want you there, she said. And I hate myself for it. The honesty hit harder than the abandonment. At least abandonment was something they did to me. This was something they felt about me. The difference between action and emotion. Between mistake and intention. I sat down across from her. First time we'd shared a table in years. I know, I said. She looked up. Surprised. I've known for years, I said. The way you'd stiffen when I walked into a room. The way you'd change the subject when I offered advice. I knew I wasn't wanted. I just didn't know you knew it too. Her eyes filled with tears. Real ones this time, not the staged panic from her voicemails. I'm a terrible person, she said. No, I said. You're an honest one. Finally, we sat there. Two women who'd spent decades pretending to like each other. Finally telling the truth. It didn't fix anything. Truth rarely does. But it cleared the air. Like opening windows in a stuffy house. She left after that. $2 on the table. Same as always. But something had shifted. The weight between us had changed. That evening, I told Joan about the conversation. We were sitting on her porch. Rusty purring on my lap. Joan lit a cigarette. Blew smoke into the evening air. At least she told you the truth, Joan said. Most people take their lies to the grave. I thought about that. About the lies we tell. About the truth we avoid. About the difference between being unwanted and being unloved. Hannah didn't love me. Probably never had. But she'd finally stopped pretending. In its own way, that was a gift. The gift of knowing where you stand. The gift of not wondering anymore. The gift of being done with hope that was never going anywhere anyway. 2 weeks after Hannah's confession, Michael came to San Diego. No warning. No phone call. Just a knock on Joan's door at 7 in the evening. I was washing dishes. Joan was watching the news. Rusty was sleeping in his favorite chair. Normal Tuesday. Normal life. Then the knock. Joan opened the door. I heard a young man's voice asking for Margaret Collins. My heart stopped. Started again. Stopped. I dried my hands on the dish towel. Walked to the front door. There he was. Michael, my grandson. Taller than I remembered. Scruff on his jaw. Books under his arm. Same gentle eyes. But different too. Older. Steadier. Like he'd found something he'd been looking for. "Hi, Grandma Maggie," he said. Just that. Simple greeting. Like we'd seen each other yesterday instead of 8 months ago. I wanted to cry. Wanted to grab him. Hold him. Make sure he was real. Instead, I stepped aside. Let him in. Joan looked him up and down. The way she'd looked at me that first day. "You the grandson?" she asked. "I am," Michael said. Joan nodded. Went back to her television. But I saw her smile. Michael sat on the couch. Set his books on the coffee table. Philosophy. Poetry. Literature. Same careful hands as his grandfather Paul. Same gentle way with fragile things. We didn't talk much at first. Just sat, looking at each other, taking inventory. He was thinner than I remembered. College diet. Too much coffee, not enough vegetables. But his eyes were bright. Alert. Like he was paying attention to the world instead of hiding from it. He told me about his girlfriend Jenny. How she painted watercolors of old buildings. How she laughed at his jokes even when they weren't funny. He told me about his job at the bookstore. How books didn't judge you. How they waited patiently to be understood. He told me about school. About wanting to teach someday. High school English. Like I'd been a librarian. Books and learning. Knowledge passed down. The long conversation between generations. His father thought it was impractical. No money in poetry, David said. No future in teaching. But Michael had found his calling. The way some people find religion. The way I'd found San Diego. We talked until Joan went to bed. Rusty curled up between us on the couch. Michael scratched the cat's ears. Rusty purred his approval. "Animals know," Michael said. "They can tell who's safe." I thought about that. About safety. About choosing who to trust. About the difference between family that hurts you and family that heals you. The next morning, I took Michael to the diner. Showed him my world. Carla looked him up and down. Same skeptical examination she'd given me. "Your grandson?" she asked. "He is," I said. She nodded. Poured him coffee without being asked. Arthur arrived at 9:15. Same table. Same order. I introduced them. 2 generations of gentle men. Both carrying loss. Both finding ways to keep going. Arthur told Michael about his birds. The sparrows nesting in his toolshed. Rose's cardinals at the feeder. Michael listened like it mattered. Like bird stories were important. Like old men's memories deserved attention. That afternoon, we walked through the neighborhood. I showed him Joan's house. Mrs. Chen's tomatoes. Mr. Rodriguez's driveway garage. "This is where I live now," I told him. "I can see why," he said. "It feels like home. Not like Ohio. Not like the house where I'd raised his father. Where I'd waited for permission to exist. This was different. Chosen. Earned." That evening, Michael helped Joan make dinner. Grilled cheese sandwiches. Tomato soup from a can. Simple food. Shared space. 3 generations around a kitchen table. Joan asked Michael about his classes. His future plans. His thoughts on modern poetry. Smart questions. Real interest. The kind of attention his own family never gave him. After dinner, Michael gave me a gift. Small box wrapped in brown paper. Inside, a magnet shaped like a birdhouse. Hand-painted. Tiny details that mattered. "Arthur made it," he said. "Asked me to give it to you." I stuck it on Joan's refrigerator. Next to the grocery list. The utility bills. The ordinary magic of daily life. That night, we sat on Joan's porch. 3 of us plus Rusty. Porch crickets stitched the dark. Michael asked about his father. About the family. About what happened at the airport. I told him the truth. Not all of it, but enough. Some people grow apart, I said. Some people choose different paths. Some people discover they were never as close as they thought they were. Michael nodded, like he understood, like he'd been thinking the same thing. I've been writing letters to you for months, he said. Sending them to the old address. They all came back, returned to sender. But I kept writing them anyway. Kept talking to you even when I couldn't find you. That's love, I told him. That's what family really looks like. Not obligation, not duty, not guilt disguised as care. Love that keeps writing letters even when they come back unopened. Love that knocks on doors in strange cities. Love that travels across the country to make sure you're all right. The next morning, Michael had to leave. Bus back to college. Real life waiting. We hugged at Joan's front door. Long embrace. Neither of us wanting to let go. Come back soon, I told him. I will, he said. This is where my grandmother lives now. After he left, I sat in Joan's kitchen. Stared at the birdhouse magnet on the refrigerator. Such a small thing. Hand-painted wood and metal. But it meant everything. It meant I was someone's grandmother. Someone's family. Someone worth remembering. It meant I hadn't been abandoned after all. I'd been released. Released to find the family that actually wanted me. Released to build a life based on choice instead of obligation. Released to discover what love looks like when it's freely given instead of grudgingly performed. That evening, I wrote myself a note. Folded it carefully. Put it in my purse next to Paul's photograph. You weren't abandoned, I wrote. You were released. You always had the key. In San Diego, with my job at the diner and my room at Joan's house, with Arthur's quiet friendship and Michael's loyal love, I had finally arrived. Not at a destination, at an understanding. This wasn't revenge against the family that left me. This was a beginning. My beginning. At 75 years old, I was finally home. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. 6 months later, I got the call I'd been expecting. Joan answered the phone, her voice sharp as always. Then softer, more careful. She handed me the receiver. Said it was my grandson Michael. His voice was quiet, strained, like he'd been crying. Grandma Maggie, he said. Dad had a heart attack. The words hung in the air between us. Heavy as stones. Is he? I started to ask. He's alive, Michael said. But it was close. Touch and go for 3 days. He's asking for you. I sat down at Joan's kitchen table. The same table where I'd read the newspaper article. Where I'd written my letter of independence. Now David wanted to see me. The son who'd left me at an airport. Who'd called me confused in the papers. Life has a way of rearranging things. Of making the abandoned indispensable again. I told Michael I'd think about it. That I'd call him back. But I already knew my answer. I was going home to Ohio. Not to stay. To finish. Joan didn't try to talk me out of it. Just asked if I needed company. I told her no. This was something I had to do alone. She nodded. Understood the weight of unfinished business. That afternoon, I called the airline. 1 ticket to Columbus. Round trip this time. I packed my brown leather bag. Same bag. Different woman carrying it. Arthur walked me to the bus stop. We didn't talk much. Didn't need to. At the curb, he handed me an envelope. His careful handwriting on cream paper. "Don't open it until you're coming back," he said. I promised. The flight to Ohio felt different. I wasn't running away this time. I was choosing to return. Temporary. Purposeful. On my own terms. Michael met me at the airport. Same terminal where I'd been left behind. Different ending this time. He looked older. Tired. Like he'd been carrying everyone's grief along with his own. We hugged at baggage claim. He felt thinner. Too much worry, not enough sleep. The drive to the hospital was quiet. Ohio countryside rolling past. Familiar but distant. Like looking at photographs of someone else's life. David was in the cardiac unit. Machines beeping. Wires everywhere. His face gray against white pillows. He looked smaller than I remembered. Fragile. Like the powerful man I'd known had been replaced by someone breakable. Hannah sat beside his bed. She looked up when I entered. Surprise flickered across her face. "You came," she said. "I came," I said. David opened his eyes. Saw me standing there. His mouth worked like he was trying to find words. "Mom," he said finally. Just that. One word. But it carried everything. Apology. Regret. Fear. I sat in the visitor's chair. Close enough to touch him. Far enough to maintain distance. We looked at each other. Really looked. Maybe for the first time in years. He was 62 years old. My son. My child. Still alive. Still my responsibility? That was the question hanging between us. "I'm sorry," he said. His voice barely a whisper. "I know," I said. "I'm sorry about the airport. About the newspaper. About everything." "I know," I said again. Sometimes sorry isn't enough. Sometimes it's everything. Sometimes it's just words that make the dying feel better about the living they wasted. I stayed for 3 days. Slept in a hotel near the hospital. Ate meals from vending machines. Watched my son recover from his own mortality. We talked. Carefully. Like people walking on ice. Testing each step. He told me about Japan. How they'd realized I wasn't with them somewhere over the Pacific Ocean. How Hannah had panicked. How the kids had asked where Grandma was. Too late by then. Too many miles. Too much pride to turn back. He told me about the weeks after. Calling my house. Getting no answer. The police reports. The newspaper article. All the drama that follows abandonment. All the noise that covers guilt. I told him about San Diego. About Joan and Arthur. About my job at the diner. About choosing family instead of accepting the one you're born with. He listened. Really listened. Like he was hearing me for the first time. On the 3rd day, he asked if I was coming back to Ohio. Back home. I told him the truth. Ohio wasn't home anymore. San Diego was. He nodded. Like he'd expected that answer. Like he deserved it. But he asked something else. Something that surprised me. "Would you visit?" he asked. "Sometimes? When you can." I considered this. Visits. Controlled doses. Boundaries instead of walls. "Maybe," I said. "On my terms. When I choose to." He nodded again. Acceptance instead of entitlement. That evening, I said goodbye. To David. To Hannah. To the grandchildren who barely looked up from their phones. Michael drove me to the airport. Same route. Different reason. At the gate, he hugged me tight. Like he was letting go and holding on at the same time. "Take care of yourself, Grandma Maggie." "I will," I said. "You too." The flight back to San Diego felt like exhaling after holding your breath. I opened Arthur's envelope somewhere over Nevada. His careful words on cream paper. "Welcome home," it said. "Your real home. Where people choose to love you instead of having to." Joan picked me up at the airport. Rusty was waiting in the car. Orange fur and purring engine. The drive to Elm Street was quiet. Comfortable. Like putting on clothes that fit. At the house, Joan made grilled cheese sandwiches. We ate without talking much. Sometimes silence says everything. That night, I wrote in my journal. Something I'd started doing since Michael's visit. I wrote about David. About forgiveness that doesn't require forgetting. About love that survives disappointment. About family that stretches across distance and time. About the difference between going back and moving forward. I'd gone back to Ohio. But I'd returned to California. Returned to the life I'd chosen. The family I'd found. The home I'd made. At 76 years old, I finally understood the difference. Going back means carrying the past with you. Moving forward means carrying only what serves your future. I chose to move forward. Every day, every choice, every breath. Forward into the life I'd built. One decision at a time. One day at a time. One act of self-determination at a time.